Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm Scott Orr. I received a few emails over the past couple of weeks. Oh, I wanted to tell you something really interesting. I may have mentioned this in the past, and I certainly brag about it on Twitter, but I obsess over the numbers of downloads of this podcast. And every single week, I mean, we have a new episode every 2 weeks, and every single week, the download total is higher than the previous episode. So the graph is just going up like a mountain, and it's so encouraging and it's so exciting. And I thank everyone for sharing it and for engaging. If you have some suggestions or complaints, I mean, don't send me complaints really, but if you want to get involved, my email is podcast@otherrecordlabels.com. And so thanks for doing all that, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Today's episode is one I've been really excited to share with you because it's a good buddy of mine, Ben, and this is such a fun conversation, and he has so much knowledge. He is so wise. The record label we're featuring today is called Infinite Companion, and it's only been in existence for the past few months. It's a brand new label. Currently, they have one artist right now, and she is Frankie Simone. You can check out Infinite Companion while we're talking at icrecords.com, and Frankie's debut EP, Love Warrior, is out in a week, I think, from when this episode airs in June in 2018. Gosh, great to have you here. Ben Hubbird from Infinite Companion. And I said that right?
Yes.
And that is, and I mean, we're going to go all over the place because I know you from CD Baby days. You worked at CD Baby for a long time. We're going to get into everything. Infinite Companion is a new label with Marmoset, which I want to talk about. You also run another record label. So I'm going to see as much as we can jam into here. I'm so excited. Do you remember, we talked a couple seconds ago about whether we've ever spoken not via email, but right. Do you remember our meet cute? Do you ever remember the first time you got in touch with me? Do you know what that was about?
God, what was it? It was it about, which project was it? I'm trying to remember.
Okay, so this is going all the way back to 2011 when you were at CD Baby, and I had been about like 8 months into running the label, and we were working on this project, an electronic project called Allosaurus. And
yes.
Okay, you remember this? And yeah, totally. There was like this was probably one of starting a record label. This was one of the breakthroughs to get an email from CD Baby personally that was from like the label department. And I was like, oh man, like I've really made it now. This is the, and I remember what happened was this was back when new releases were on Tuesday. And on the Monday morning, I think I sent an email like Sunday night, my time. And I said, like, I haven't got a confirmation or anything. And I didn't see the album in, like, usually it appears a couple days early in some distributors. And I was like, I'm just a little worried about the digital release of this record. And I sent that to like the general mailbox at CD Baby, and then who we do all of our digital through. And then you responded on the Monday, and we're like, I think this was like Monday afternoon, because it would have been like morning Pacific time. And you were like, hey man, there's something wrong. Something got messed up, but don't worry, I'm going to take care of it. And then I remember it was like, I told the band, they were kind of freaking out. And like within 6 hours, it was like pushed to all the streaming sites. And so that was our meet cute.
I really like that Allosaurus record. That was
a great record.
First starting to do, like, I had been working with some, like, you know, top selling artists and labels in the CD Baby catalog for a while at that point.
Right.
A couple of years I had been doing that job. And that was really early on in the time when I had started finally like digging into new music that I wasn't necessarily already working with.
Okay.
And like kind of looking for cool things that I could listen to. And yeah, Allosaurus was one of the first records that I discovered in that process that has
that's awesome.
blossomed into a whole team at CD Baby now.
That's amazing.
Really, really exciting.
I want to ask you about that, but I do remember another anecdote about Allosaurus. This band was so funny because back in the record came out in September of 2011, and in the fall of 2011, one of the guys said, "Hey, I got this email from Spotify, and somebody there has put our tracks on one of their playlists." This was 2011, and I remember being like, okay, I don't care.
Whatever.
Yeah. It was so, I mean, it actually did turn into like a few dollars, but it was like, I thought like, oh, I've heard of them. I think they're in the UK, and it just really wasn't a big deal. It was just so funny because that would have totally like, bought our lunch if it were, today, or bought many a lunches.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, and it's funny how that, it felt like watched those, like there's I guess an inflection point where a service becomes popular enough to have a serious impact on the bottom line, and that simultaneously means that it's popular enough that it's really hard for a small label or an artist to get their ear.
Oh, totally.
It's so ironic.
Yeah, exactly. I know that to totally be true. And now
I will say,
yeah,
I'll just say Spotify has done a really good job, I think, of, we all can relate, I'm sure, to some extent, the issue that they struggle with, which is like, how do we drink from this fire hose? And I think they've done a pretty good job of trying to keep that balanced and make sure that indies are still, well represented in their curation efforts. So I will say, them and Apple have both, I feel like, more than previous iterations of digital giants or of big box music stores, for that matter,
totally
have been more of a friend to indies.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're totally right. And right now, I have nothing bad to say about Spotify, and I really find them to be very artist friendly when it comes to, helping kind of like guiding the artist through the process. And I have a buddy right now who's doing everything on his own, and he got himself verified, and he's tracking his own sales and everything. And I mean, the stuff that they do, the stuff that they do at Christmas, that campaign they do where they send out those infographics for each artist, like that is genius. Like whoever, somebody at Apple is probably just like so mad they didn't think of that. But it's just, I think it's so great. So good.
Well, it's funny because I think it's a fundamentally different approach. Also, like Apple has, a built-in corporate orientation towards privacy, and that sort of precludes them from doing a lot of those same things. Even, with Spotify, that is obviously voluntary and you don't have to share it. But I think Apple is that inherent privacy orientation has I think kept them out of the artist facing portal space, or, allowing artists to market to fans directly space.
Right.
In a way that might, I feel like when I talk to artists at CD Baby, that people are really excited about getting added to Spotify playlists, but I feel like I'm always having to bring up and also we should get on some Apple Music playlists.
Right. Yeah.
30 million subscribers domestically.
It's true.
That's
I know.
People.
I mean, myself and another guy on our label, Timid the Brave, are on a really great Canadian singer-songwriter playlist through Apple Music Canada. Now that's just Apple Music Canada, but it really doesn't. For some reason, it doesn't do anything for play. Not anything, but as much for plays as the same type of playlist on Spotify, which I don't understand. And I don't think it's the users necessarily, even though globally Spotify has more users. I think it's just maybe the behaviors of Apple users are different than Spotify users. I think
Spotify does I won't say it's a better job, because I think it's a decision that Apple has made to not market their own curation as heavily and aggressively.
Right.
And also one of their biggest engines of curation is Beats One. And they've been pouring a lot of effort into Beats One as their sort of frontline, like top tier curation product.
Right.
And it's excellent. Like, it's a really good radio station. I feel like a kind of constant sense of regret that I don't have more hours in the day to just listen to radio in general.
Right.
But I think that means that like the playlists on service don't get as much attention from the editorial staff or from the sort of from a marketing perspective. I think that means, less consumption of those playlists. They're also, like, again, going back to the privacy thing, it's harder to see what playlists are actually regularly updated on Apple Music because they don't show when songs were added to playlists.
Right.
They don't show how many followers a playlist has. You can't get the same sort of quick glance at a playlist to understand what kind of playlist it is on the service. And I think that also inhibits, people engaging as much with playlists as a product on the service. I use Apple Music and I love it.
Yeah, me too.
It's not geared towards discovery and exploration. It's geared towards your own collection. And I love it for that reason.
Agreed. And I love
that's coming.
I often go to Spotify. I often open Spotify to see what they're recommending, and then we'll go add it to my library through Apple Music.
Literally done that.
Yeah.
So dumb. So dumb.
I know. But you know what? It's like,
that also speaks, I will say, like, panning over to then like how artists and labels work with those services. I think it speaks to the importance of finding your audience where they are. And part of one of the reasons I get so frustrated with artists who I'm totally sympathetic to the argument against, streaming services as the primary mode of interaction with music. It's I think the payments to indie artists could be better.
Right.
I think the way that the revenue is divided is somewhat unfair and could be adjusted. But also, it is where a huge portion of your audience, and especially a huge portion of your audience that are like us, that are weird and obsessive about music and subscribe to more than one streaming service, and end up like people who are on Spotify are spending $120 a year on music, which is more than the national, like almost double the national average. And that's just on the streaming service. Those people are more likely to buy vinyl and more likely to go to shows because those are the top consumers of music, right? Those are the avid fans. And increasingly the subscriber pool is widening as it's come to scale. And that means that there is a larger pool of streams to be distributed. But also I think it's true that limiting the distribution of your music to only companies that are, pay fairly or have, sales only, or it just means that you're not reaching people in whatever weird method they have of finding music.
That's fair.
I think that's the main reason, to just kind of get it out everywhere possible and meet people where they are. Yeah.
And I think sometimes a lot of times an artist will say, how come, when you share on Facebook our album, you only put the Spotify link, or you only put the Spotify and Apple Music? And my argument is like, looking at our numbers, Spotify is like 75% and Spotify and Apple is like 99%. And so like if somebody has, my kind of thing is thinking, instead of providing links for Tidal and 7 Digital and like Rhapsody and whatever, the millions that there are, to me, it's like people know how to get their own music, and they know, if they know your name and they want to find you, like I don't necessarily need to provide a million links in one social post, because people know, music listeners, they have their way of doing things. And I want to ask you something you said, just because this is something I've always been curious. We're talking about Spotify listeners, and there is a bit of a complaint that, one of the issues of artists not getting paid has to do with that fans are only paying $9.99 to have every record that releases, this Friday, and every record that's ever released. But you're saying that those people are paying $120 a year for music, and that's more than they would have 10 years ago. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it's more than the average. So the average, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I should probably before I start spouting them.
No, that's okay. You can speculate.
Actually, what I'm talking about, but my understanding is that that's significantly more than the average person spends on music, which means I don't think it means like that Spotify is causing these people to spend more than they otherwise would. Mm-hmm. Although I do think that might be the case. But that's not the argument I'm making. The case that I'm making is you're inherently getting people who are willing to spend $120, which is more than the average, which means you're seeing that inherently sorts the people who value music more highly, who are willing to pay more for music, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are people who don't engage with music and who drag that average down on a national level are people who might just be free subscribers to Spotify or just listen to the radio.
True,
people who really just have their radio on in their car and listen to pop music on the radio. Mm-hmm. Those people aren't the early adopters to a new music service that costs a subscription fee, right?
Yes.
And so the people who are the people who really do want to dig deep, really do want to discover music, and who already value music to the place where they're willing to spend $10 a month specifically on music.
No, that's a good point. And I try to think, these are people who like the $120 a year would translate to one CD a month, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I mean, it's funny. It's the back to the old record club model. Just get it.
It's true. That's true. You get 13 free CDs for one penny. Okay. So, we are 2018 right now. You and I first met 2011 at CD Baby. You were there for how long were you at CD Baby?
9.5 years. It would have been 10 years in March.
Okay. And when you left, there was you left just recently, and there was on your Facebook, there was all these people congratulating you. I read something that somebody said that this is a role, like you worked with labels, but it was something that kind of you invented or was just invented for you.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
Okay.
It was an amalgamation of a number of different positions and initiatives. There was some really cool stuff going on when I started at CD Baby. Dylan Majerick, who runs Badman Records, was doing a really awesome label group and working with Ryko and then ADA to bring some really awesome physical CDs to marketplace that otherwise wouldn't have had as cool of a release. Pixies live shows from the first Pixies reunion tour and a Real Big Fish live CD and some other projects that were part of a more formal label group. And Ben Cannell and Phil Bauer, who were sort of higher up in the organization when I started, were working with some of the VIP artists to make sure that their records got efficiently handled. And ultimately, I was able to sort of bring all of those threads together into one place and combine it also with the work that we did to highlight the best of the catalog. Okay. And so, I'm not being modest in saying I didn't invent it, but I think we did definitely in that time. And Phil directed a lot of this as well, but we did sort of move in the direction of consolidating all of those things into one more coherent place where we handle all of the VIP artist and label inquiries and curate the catalog and communicate that internally and externally and pitch streaming services and stores for features and playlists. What
was your job description on your first day at CD Baby?
I was a customer service person.
Okay.
Customer service when I started at CD. I had a previous career. I don't know if we've talked about this, Scott. I had a past life as a community organizer.
Okay.
For about five years. I worked on political campaigns and on environmental campaigns.
Oh, wow.
For a number of years, doing recruitment and volunteer organizing and field organizing
that's awesome.
A bunch of
I didn't know that.
Global campaigns and political campaigns. And so I had been doing that for about 5 years and was tremendously burnt out. I was at a point in my life where I felt like I was being sucked dry. I really loved the work that I was doing, and it was tremendously important work at the time. And I'm really proud of some of the things that we accomplished, but it also was true that everyone in that world is kind of running on fumes to one degree or another.
Okay.
Like the way that those organizations are held together, because there's not a lot of money in progressive politics.
Right.
The way that you can be effective is by just having people who are a little bit crazed and motivated to work 80-hour weeks at a time. And I honestly was finding myself unable to maintain friendships or relationships, and just kind of falling deeper and deeper into that world, which, is fine for what it is. But I think I realized that I couldn't do that for my entire life. And I found myself sort of discouraged and looking around for something else. And CD Baby was going to be just a job, just a temporary, I can do this.
Had you done any music industry stuff at all?
Yeah, I mean, I had been in bands, and I was actually a CD Baby client. Like, we had a record. My band had a record on CD Baby.
Cool.
I worked in a venue for a number of years when I was a kid. I was 12. I started volunteering at a venue called the Wow Hall in Eugene, Oregon. Shout out to the Wow Hall. They're awesome. It's a community-run, nonprofit venue and performing arts space that is just powered by an incredible community of volunteers. And they took me in when I was a little ignorant kid and showed me how a venue works. I got to see so much incredible music and learn so much about how live music works. And I had a radio show. I did a college radio show. Okay. And I've been in bands and that kind of thing. But, all of that was kind of for me, it was never, I didn't ever view music as a potential career path.
Right.
It didn't seem plausible. It felt like something that I could do for fun, but that the idea that it would be a career felt unrealistic.
And so how did you find out about CD Baby?
I found out about CD Baby.
You had a CD on them, right? Okay.
Yeah, we made a record. My friend Casey and I made a record together. We have a band called The Morals, which I would encourage everyone not to look up. Not that I'm not.
I'll include the link in the description.
Yeah. It's definitely a passion project. We do it because we just love playing music together.
Yeah.
And so I don't pretend that it's anything more than that.
Was CD Baby local to you? Did you live here?
So we made a record with a friend of ours and recorded it over those records that are it took 2 years recording 3 nights a week in his basement. And it was just one piece at a time. His daughter was not yet born when we started and was 2 years old when we finished. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, I know those.
So we finished that record, and he was like, "We'll put it up on CD Baby." He was starting a record label, and he was like, "I'll put it up on CD Baby." And I was like, "What is CD Baby?" He's like, "Explains this indie distributor."
Was that when the logo was still a CD with a baby on it?
It was a CD with a baby on it. Yeah.
That's great.
That was how I first found out about it. I think that was in 2007, and it was late 2007 when I ended up applying, and then started in 2008.
And you were a customer service rep.
Yeah, I was answering the phone and answering emails. I loved it. I like that. It was much smaller company. It was about 50 or so employees when I started there, and it was this really bizarre freewheeling atmosphere. The reason was that the owner had kind of washed his hands of it to some extent.
Oh, okay.
And it was running without him. And so it was a little bit of the teachers out of the classroom, to some extent, but in a really positive way. Everyone cared a lot about the artists. And so everyone was really empowered to go out of their way in service of the artists.
And you were talking, sorry,
go ahead.
You were talking with your customer service. We're talking about young bands who are needing help. Basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, or people who needing help, or just logistically changing things about their album, wondering what the process is, wanting to send in 100 CDs because
Were you guys doing digital distribution at this time?
Yeah. So iTunes launched in 2003, I think.
Okay.
And CD Baby was one of the launch partners. So that was the initial foray into digital distribution. So
right.
CD Baby had been doing digital for about 4.5 years when I started.
How many other, I get asked all the time, who to go with when it comes to uploading. How many other people, and I always say CD Baby just because of you and the nice people there, but how many others were, how many other options did artists have for uploading at that time?
At that time, it was a couple heaping handfuls. The barriers to entry are high, but not prohibitive. Okay. And so it's a space that people will enter and then realize it has been until, I think what I'll say actually is it was only in the last couple years that somebody finally figured out how to truly automate a lot of the stuff. Okay. And that was DistroKid. Philip's a genius and built a software that does incredible stuff. I'm in awe. I will speak
I've heard that a lot.
Frankly, I'm in awe of their technological solutions.
Yeah.
That said, if you're a label like yourself or like us, I don't want a purely technological solution. I still need to work with someone, and especially someone that's excited about the music that I'm releasing.
Totally.
That's I think what CD Baby does so well is just a whole room. Walking into the office in the morning, there was just a whole room of passionate people who are almost entirely musicians themselves, helping other musicians and labels get their stuff out there. And that to me, that was my job when I started. And I just loved it so much. In the first 6 months I was there, I got to have conversations with the Antlers and with Justin Vernon, who distributed a project with CD Baby. Wow. And it was, discovering like really incredible musicians and music that started by self-distributing, and that being part of that launch pad was really exciting to me. And I realized like, wow, I really love this. I think I'm good at it.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Kind of took off from there.
I go back to DistroKid. I remember when that kind of came on the scene a couple years ago and people were talking about it. I was really interested in how, their pricing model and how things worked. And I was like, oh, maybe I should research that. I knew the relationship I had with you at CD Baby and that there was a human element to that, like you say, that has a huge value. And you've done some incredible help for us, not just technically, but advice and pitching to editorial. But it just didn't make sense because I think the pricing, like it's really appealing for a bedroom artist, but when you have multiple artists and multiple releases and you want to do stuff like, choose your own release date or have your label as the copyright, there's a lot of extra features that cost more money. And then of course, just that, a relationship that was already there with CD Baby, it just didn't really make sense, but it is cool.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's, I would call myself, I guess, like a technological Luddite. Like I am simultaneously fascinated by and repelled by technology, I think. Right. And so it's really exciting to see someone solving problems that way. And at the same time, like part of me that loves like spending 3 days in the wilderness, feels a sense of loss around the human connection.
So at what point did you start Party Damage? And can you tell me a little bit about that?
So Party Damage was, Casey, I actually talked about the morals a little bit. Casey and I had been playing music together for, at that point, it was 2012. So I guess we've been playing music together for 10 years at that point.
Wow.
And we had been talking a little bit about, Casey had worked in music. He worked at record stores and then was the music editor at Willamette Week here in Portland, and then was the editor at the Believer magazine, and so had a history in music journalism. And I had been working for CD Baby for a while, and we felt like, wow, we actually have some like tools and skills that we could help. And really the our only thought was like, we can help our friends make records. Like we had friends.
Right.
And really, we were really like, we loved them as people, but also loved the music they were making and felt like it could find a wider audience. And so, and that was, something Casey had been working on at the paper when he was writing, was like, he was part of a shift in that paper where they specifically started writing more about local music and supporting local artists. And I felt like I had the same orientation at CD Baby, that I was always thinking about ways to do more for bands and for artists. And so we had that in common. And then I think we enjoyed arguing about music and had a musical taste that overlapped sometimes. And those projects that we would listen to, those bands that we would listen to, that we both felt really passionately about, I think we felt some kind of like pretty strong. We felt that those artists had some objective truth to their excellence. And
they were all your friends mostly?
No. So we were thinking about this in terms of like, we both really love Elvis Costello. Casey maybe a little more than me, and I think he might have introduced me to Elvis Costello, but or like the Weaker Thans and John K. Samson. That we had these artists that we both just had like felt like we loved more than the rest of the world. Right. Like, why does the world love these artists more? And then applying that same metric, we agreed that we would only put out records that we both felt like 100% yes on, that either of us had a question about it, we probably wouldn't do it.
Okay. That's good.
And so that was kind of how we started thinking about it. And then one of our friends was putting out a record and asked me at CD Baby if I could help them release it. And I said, hey, like, would you be interested? Casey and I have been talking about starting a record label, and kind of went from there.
Wow. And I mean,
that was Wild Ones.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense because, you had essentially the key to the kingdom. I mean, you're seeing so many records being released and helping artists and working at a distributor. I feel like it would, if you're passionate about music, it kind of makes sense to start a label.
Yeah, it did feel a bit, and it has over the years felt like a bit of I think the phrase is postman's holiday.
Okay.
I will, on my time off from my day job, my hobby is putting out records.
Right.
My day job is also putting out records. It can definitely feel a little bit overwhelming sometimes. And I miss, I don't get to spend as much time on my bike. I don't get to spend as much time in the woods.
Right.
And Casey and I have been less creative together as a band since starting the label. But you're right. There's like those synergies of like, even just that I didn't have to ask somebody what an ISRC code was. I just knew what an ISRC code was already.
Yeah.
I think we did have a little bit of a head start anyways.
Well, even financially too, there's a few things that you would have had access to that would save your band's money, which is huge.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely like, being able to plug into distribution easily, have us kind of in-house was great. I tried to keep those streams as separate as possible. I would always try to bounce my own projects off of someone else internally to make sure that I wasn't like just wrong about something being good before I pitched it. But also, I could guide the projects in a direction that I felt like was going to find an audience. Hopefully, I don't know.
Well, and I've been following the label right from the beginning, and I remember for our Canadian listeners, you signed Andy Shauf just before he blew up as well. Yeah, and that was huge. I mean, he's like a national treasure now here in Canada since he signed Arts and Crafts. But this was back at the Bearer of Bad News.
Yeah, well, it was actually funny because we found out he had released the Bearer of Bad News in 2000 and I think 12 or 14, 12, I think, on CD Baby.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So
just on his own.
Yeah. And that was what we heard. And when Casey saw him at M for Montreal and started talking to him and his manager, and the conversation initially was like, what's next? Like, is he looking for a label? And they said, well, he's looking for, to sign to a much larger label, but we are interested in sort of re-releasing Bearer of Bad News, which had never really seen a formal release in the United States.
Right.
So it was a really exciting prospect to us, because that record still has like a really emotional place in my heart.
Gosh, it's so good.
Being able to be part of the team. And we teamed up with some of our best friends, another label here in town, Tender Loving Empire.
Right.
And they were able to help us fund that release. And I think everyone was just so thrilled that we had this giant high five of these two labels that had such admiration for each other, plus an artist who was more involved in that release. Like, we structured the deal so that Andy was really actively involved in it. And
cool.
Everyone was like super thrilled to be part of that team. And then with the end result, and I should say Amanda Pitts at Cobra Commanda, then at that point, now Chromatic PR, did an absolutely incredible job. Jess Martin at Cosign, our radio promoter,
cool.
Was an absolute monster. Just did like tireless work for that record, and ultimately, introduced Andy to Chris Duerdas at KCRW, who really loved him, brought him on school night, and was what it led to ultimately him being signed to Anti.
Wow,
which was another little dream for Casey and I. That feeling of success when Andy went to the label that I feel like is the most tirelessly supportive of the truly great idiosyncratic artists in the world who are making
awesome
songs that nobody else can make.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
That was a tremendous thrill. And I feel lucky to have been just a tiny piece of that. I think every ounce of credit that anybody else gets for that record is ultimately probably unfairly taking away from the absolute brilliance of Andy and just being like such a
he made that record all by himself, didn't he? Like mixed and everything.
There was I think a drummer that played on one song.
Okay.
And played every other instrument, including clarinet. And
oh my gosh. And as a Canadian in the indie music scene, I am one of the people that overlooked the Bearer of Bad News when it came out. Like originally with the original artwork. And I think it was honestly, I think it was too cool for the time. Like, I don't think we were ready for it. Like there was something really, chill about it. And, it was a style of music that, maybe just didn't fit that era in 2010 or 2012 or whatever. But now it's like, it just works so well.
The first time I saw Andy live, he opened the show with Wendell Walker, which is, for those of you should immediately just go listen to this song. A song that basically the entire sort of saga of working with Andy came out of Casey and I's passion for this one song. But it's an 8-minute long murder ballad that starts with like almost a whisper, and he would open the show. There would be the challenge is, and this was, I think, at South by Southwest in a crowded, loud room. And he opened the show into this room of shouting, essentially.
Right.
The quietest song on the record. And it took less than 5 seconds for the entire room to be completely silent.
Unbelievable.
I've never seen anything like it. It was like amazing. So immediately arresting. And I think that's I don't know what it is. He has so there's some immediacy to his songwriting and to his performance that it's just rare, and you just see it and you know, but I don't know how to describe it.
Well, I like his new record. I'm a huge fan of the Bearer of Bad News. To me, that's a Canadian classic, and it's, but he, after the visitor or the party, that he just blew up, and over the summer and all last year, he just blew up. In fact, after this conversation, I want to check Discogs to see how much my white Party Damage vinyl is worth of the Bear of Bad News.
I think the white vinyl isn't that that's the first pressing, right?
No. Well, yeah.
Second pressing on black. Yes. So
Okay.
First one was. Yes.
Yes.
So that's a first. I think it was the first 500 were white.
Oh man. Oh
and
yeah.
Then has been black, I believe.
Oh yeah. I'm cashing that in. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not. Oh, it's great.
I felt really lucky. They were kind enough to give Casey and I copies of the first pressing as well. So I have.
Oh, cool.
I have the whole history of that record on the first pressing, and then the test pressings, and the first edition of our version.
I love test pressings. I want to ask you about that record, just as a general, because I've often thought about, the opportunity to re-release a record. And was that a challenge, knowing that a portion of Canada and his hometown and the press would ignore a re-release essentially? Was that a challenge at all?
We spent a lot of time talking about it, and Amanda Pitts, again, our publicist, was super helpful in guiding that conversation.
Okay.
And one of the things that she made us aware of was like, listen, we're technically not going to be able to premiere any of the songs because they've been released before, and we don't want to be dishonest about that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So we were trying to figure out a way to talk about it that really explained, like, this is a record that this is a gem, and it had only been a couple years. So it wasn't, or a year even. It wasn't like we weren't doing like some Light in the Attic dig back into the 70s.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I saw the numbers and almost nobody in the United States had heard the record. And so the opportunity just to present it to people pretty honestly as like, hey, you probably haven't heard this. This is finding a wider release now. It worked in that case. I don't think I think it worked because we were pretty honest about it, and because we were doing it as a label and putting our kind of like saying like, this is something we discovered and we're really passionate about it. And Andy was he hadn't played in the United States in years and years.
But there was a different track listing and a different artwork, right?
I believe the track listing was identical.
Okay.
But there was different artwork. Shout out to Adam Grano, our designer.
Amazing artwork. Amazing.
Together, absolutely beautiful.
Was that package in a way to kind of trick people, or just to kind of hit the reset button?
It was really just about making a distinction between those releases, and honestly maintaining that. I think having a copy of that first edition is special. It's like this was the expression. I felt tremendously a warm feeling that like this incredible artist had created this record on his own and then self-released it. Even more so self-released it through CD Baby that I worked for.
Yeah.
And we were definitely not trying to distance ourselves from that, but rather say, you probably didn't hear that because A, it was a very small pressing. They had sold all of them already.
Sure.
And B, just never found, he wasn't focusing on the States at that time. It was just a self-released record that's mostly just released in Canada.
So did you get any press coverage in Canada for the?
We did. Exclaim was super. I think that he has a I don't want to make it sound derogatory. He has a very rabid following in certain years.
Sure. Yeah.
Rightly so. Mostly I think it's just that people in Canada had more of an opportunity to see him perform. And it literally just takes seeing Andy perform to be completely overwhelmed and in love with his music for life. Right. Like, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And it was just that there was more opportunity for folks in Canada to have seen him. And so there were outlets that covered it from the angle of this, American label is excited about this record and is giving it a reissue, and we're excited to support it.
Well, that's kind of a story on its own. Yeah.
Yeah. It was tremendously validating to see how people responded to that. It was one of the best experiences we've had. And again, it ultimately just boiled down to Andy being Andy and
no, that's fair.
you can't look away.
So did you have any expectations of releasing the follow-up to that, or were you always just a way to kind of tribute that record?
I don't want to get too much into our
sure
contracts or anything.
Sure.
We definitely were excited for supporting Andy in whatever way was best for his career. And if that meant working with him on the next record, while he looked for a label for the one after that, we were excited for that. As it turned out, he was able to get the attention of Andy, and they did the party. And we were super thrilled that was the way it worked out.
Well, and to me, when I started running a label, to me that has always been like the end goal. The end goal is not for me to become a major label, but is to, hopefully be a feeder or a tastemaker for the next level. You know what I mean? To me, that has always been a dream, to do what you've done.
Scott, can we hit pause for 1 second? I'm losing my conference room.
Oh, sure.
And I'm going to find another one.
Okay.
Cool. Sorry. And let's see. I might have to just sit at my desk, which might be a little bit loud. Hopefully I won't annoy anyone with the conversation. Okay. We still sounding okay?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's no problem.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so here I am. I'm back.
Yeah, I just think that's, we had an artist, a band on our label who's just recently signed with Arts and Crafts, and they were, we did an EP with them years ago. I had absolutely zero impact on their career, but it's, to me, just to be able to say there's a former roster and then they left and they've done their own thing all on their own, and they're an incredible band, Elevator. And but to see them thriving now, it's like, and it's like you've been saying over and over, you can't take any credit, but it's just so rewarding to see bands get what they deserve.
Yep, exactly. And we've had that experience a couple times. Wild Ones also joined the roster of Top Shelf Records.
Oh, wow.
And we got to know those guys who are incredible.
Great. That's amazing.
And have done such awesome stuff since then. So yeah, it is like our favorite experience as a label, I think.
That's so cool. Talking about other labels, I want to ask you about something you talked to me about in email, which is mind-blowing, and it's the Portland Label Coalition. What is this?
So yeah, it's funny because we had initially the idea that this would be this like public entity that was group of labels working together and supporting each other and doing awesome stuff. And we've done a little bit of that, but honestly, what's been most exciting for me and the folks that are part of this is really just getting together maybe every month or so and complaining, like having a couple beers and talking to other people who manage record labels.
Amazing.
It's been really helpful to just compare stories and share notes and talk about who's struggling with what, finding those things that are problems for all of us and figuring out if there are solutions that one of us has for those problems that someone else hasn't thought of. It's been incredible. So it's a group of labels, awesome venue here in town called Holocene put together for a few years in a row a little event called Label Mates, and it was a record show basically for record labels. And at that event, I sat next to John Shepsky of Fluff and Gravy Records and Vincent Brancari of Marmoset Records, or Marmoset Recording Company, and getting to know those guys. I think was definitely the impetus for this project, and it's kind of blossomed from there, and we have a really cool community of labels who are. Can you tell us some of them? Out, yeah. So let's see. I want to try not to leave anyone out.
Sure.
There's Good Cheer Records and Kill Rock Stars and Tender Loving Empire and Fresh Select and Party Damage and Fluff and Gravy and Mama Bird. And I think I'm trying to think if I've.
You said
horribly excluded anyone, but
X-Ray, that is a radio station, right?
Yeah.
Or is that a label as well?
X-Ray, yeah, X-Ray Records is an awesome little label that is an imprint of the radio station, essentially, and they've done a really awesome job of releasing records that I think they're challenging records. They put out the Sun Angle record and Blessed Chest, who are a couple of Portland bands made up of kind of Portland rock royalty in both cases, who are making like really interesting, aggressive, challenging music.
Cool.
And they just, I think, put out the Secret Drum Band record, which is awesome. Everyone should listen to that.
So how did that start? Like, I mean, I think it's a great idea. It's a brilliant idea. And I want to see if that's something that, I can do regionally, but how did that start? And were you nervous at all reaching out to other labels and saying, hey, let's steal each other's ideas?
Yeah, it's funny. It definitely came out of the Label Mates festival thing. We kind of started talking at that point. We put together a similar thing at PDX Pop Now. A bunch of labels had a little pop-up shop, basically. And we just kind of started brainstorming about what we could do. And then when I sent the initial email, I was really nervous and like put everyone on BCC because I didn't want anyone to feel like I was putting them on blast, and felt like very, very shy about reaching out to Kill Rock Stars because they're so cool.
Yeah, no kidding.
But Ben and Portia were like super excited and friendly and have become very active supporters. And it's been a really tremendously like positive. And
did some labels say no, we're good, or was everybody really on board?
Some labels never got back to the email.
Okay, that's fair.
but I think definitely the community of labels that we're working with is at least a good portion of the labels in Portland that are doing stuff right now.
And how often do you get together? You said once a month?
Roughly. It's very, obviously,
sure.
As you can imagine, that scheduling is very challenging. Yeah. And we try to keep it as informal as possible. We're really not trying. The last thing on earth that we would want is for it to be a chore.
Sure. So it's just a get together, like just a chat and vent.
Yep. And then we'll plan, maybe we're doing in May, we're setting up a little record fair here in Portland, where we're all going to bring, our newest releases and some records from our catalog and sell them and then have a little show at a brewery.
Well, this to me is so fascinating, and obviously it's very in line with what I'm doing here, but it's so fascinating because it's like a record label of record labels. I mean, the whole idea of a label, from my standpoint when I started, was here's a bunch of bands trying to figure out how to press CDs, and let's put our resources together. Let's share let's share guitar amps. Let's share recording equipment. Let's share our knowledge on how to reach blogs. I think that's so fascinating to think that could possibly happen with labels.
Yeah, that's something that I think when Casey and I started Party Damage, one of the things that we were pretty vocal about was wanting to be fairly genre agnostic.
Okay.
I think I'll be the first to admit that we've done a pretty bad job of some of that. I mean, some of what we wanted to do was to really actively promote diversity on our roster and try to put out as many kinds of records. We wanted to make a jazz record. We wanted to make a hip hop record. I think we haven't done as good of a job at doing that as we could have maybe. But nonetheless, I think the work with the Label Coalition is part of that is being able to work with all these different people and every label has a different approach, right? And we don't all like everyone else's releases. Definitely not all of them.
That's fair.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But I think realizing how the different ways that people approach the project, I think makes all of us better at it. Thinking about how a label like Erst approaches their records and how much engineering work they do with their artists is really interesting for us, and hearing about how they approach press and how they approach radio, working with, TLE, and, they have not just a label, but also a series of really awesome shops for local handmade goods. And learning about how their sort of synergistic approach means that they can sell their records in their own record store. And they're good enough to carry our records there as well, which is really awesome.
That's so cool.
But yeah, those conversations, I think, we all share some of the same struggles, but also have really, really the differences in the labels, to me, are the exciting thing about it.
So the label coalition, is this something that could happen on a bigger level? Do you think that it's possible there on a national level that labels could get together?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because there actually is a national organization of independent record labels called A2IM, and as a Canadian label, I believe you could join, I think, as a associate member. Although I don't know, we should look into that, because it could be that it might be for U.S. and Canada, but I know at least in the U.S., A2IM is a national association of independent record labels. They have a conference in New York every June. I've gone, and it's incredible. And it is exactly that. It is an industry organization for independent record labels, and together with like Merlin and AIM in the UK, have done a lot. I think a big part of why Apple and Spotify have been so supportive of indies is because of the work of organizations like A2IM.
Wow,
pushing them. Yeah, and then Spotify hired Jen Massett, their new head of their indie team, was working at A2IM.
Oh, amazing! And that's
so
great.
It's the organization that really has done more, I think, in the U.S. To further independent labels and their success.
That's really cool. So for what you guys are doing in Portland, how would you advise other cities to start something similar to that?
Just start it.
Okay.
Just do it.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, I think we had grandiose ideas about what we were going to do when we started the label coalition, and it isn't, we still don't have a profile picture up on the Facebook page, for example.
Right.
Like, it's not like a super big public thing yet.
Yeah.
But even so, just getting together for beers every month or two has been tremendously valuable.
Do you have go ahead.
Don't be intimidated. Just do it.
That's smart. Do you have like a chat group or like a little forum that you guys can connect on?
Yeah, we've got a little secret Facebook group that we connect on, and we have multiple email threads.
That's great.
Less efficient about it than we could be, probably.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's so great. And like we were saying early on, I've said so many times, it's just, finding, like, running a label it's something that I think about when I go to sleep and I think about when I wake up. But to be able to kind of share that with someone is priceless.
Yeah, it's been really great to find this community, and
that is really cool.
Yeah.
So I won't keep you much longer, but I want to talk about what you're doing now. You left CD Baby just this past Christmas, and you're heading over to Marmoset. Can you tell us what's happening over there?
Yeah, so I've been here for about a month. Marmoset, if you don't know, is a creative music agency, sort of boutique licensing and original music composition. And they've been around for about 8 years.
Yeah.
And have a really amazing catalog of indie bands for licensing, as well as an incredible team of producers and composers who work on staff and on contracts to create original music for projects.
Oh, cool.
And the project that I'm going to be working on is a new thing called Infinite Companion. And it's going to be basically an in-house record label. And the idea is we work with a ton of different artists who have incredible music that we're helping find success in licensing, which is, a big part of the career these days for an indie artist to really be successful. I think it's a pretty important part of the revenue puzzle. And so really thrilled with that side of the work, but realizing like we could also help with some of the other parts of this work. And if we can find exciting things to support, especially from underrepresented communities, from people who might not have had the opportunity to make a record or to have a record find a wide audience, that we have a platform here that we can use to sort of amplify those voices and to make records that might not otherwise exist.
Right.
And to have them make financial sense because we're able to sort of integrate the work that we're doing as a label with the work that we're doing as a licensing company.
Is there a certain genre that you're going after, or will it be broad?
It's going to be as broad as we can make it.
Okay, cool. I mean, that kind of makes sense. So,
go ahead.
Are the artists, so the artists that you find through your catalog who have submitted to Marmoset, are they, have they already released some of their music? Is this music that they have made just for licensing purposes that you think would be good for the public?
So most of the artists that Marmoset works with, they release their music one way or another, whether as part of a record label. We work with some really awesome record labels, including Tender Loving Empire, who I mentioned. But also, a lot of folks who self-release their music. And I think that the synergy is around being able to sort of integrate the efforts and to have, the success in licensing be part of the story that we can tell around the artist. We're definitely not just looking for like super licensable music. That obviously for what we do is helpful, but I think it's not the prerequisite. It's definitely not sort of the impetus for it.
Right. So you talked about the importance of licensing. I've found it to be very intimidating and discouraging. It's in the past 10 years. Like, what advice can you give to labels who are trying to find some home or for DIY artists who are looking to get their music licensed?
So I'm pretty new to this. I started here about a month ago, and one of the things that I'm most excited about is getting to work with this incredible team and learn more about how all this works.
Right.
We've done, as a label, we've done licensing. We have some of our catalog with Marmoset, and we've done licensing deals directly, but we were never very good at it. I don't really know how it works. And one of the things that I've been picking up in the week or two that I've been having these conversations is that not everything is right for all different kinds of licensing. And Marmoset right now does a lot of advertising licensing, and there's music that doesn't work for that.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean that it's bad music. It just means that it's not necessarily a good fit for what advertisers are looking for, especially, if there's no instrumentals. A lot of artists don't have instrumentals of their songs. True. And that can be a real challenge. If things are if the pacing is pretty slow and doesn't give you a sort of direction, emotional direction, it can be a challenge, especially if it's a song that's driven by the lyric and then you're using the instrumental version and it doesn't really have
that's fair
trust to it. So it's something that I'm excited to learn more about what makes music successful for licensing, and also to think about, like, because some of the most iconic, even in the world of advertising, some of the most iconic campaigns I can think of have used songs that you wouldn't necessarily think of as
fair,
perfect for licensing. Like the Volkswagen Pink Moon commercial, I think, is the one that everyone thinks of as the most brilliant moment in creative licensing and advertising. But how can a label or an artist find a home for their song that is perfect? I honestly don't know. I think I'm still kind of learning that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I mean, I've heard all along that people saying it's a great alternative revenue stream for artists to kind of further exploit the music that they've made for their fans. And I do feel hopeful for it, for us to find some success with it. And you just turn on the TV for 10 minutes and just count how many times you hear music in the background. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like there's definitely a nonstop need for it.
Well, and there's more TV now than ever. Like, there's Amazon and there's Netflix,
more dramas,
and Hulu, and like all these original shows, all of which need music.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of opportunity. I do think, one of the things that that as a community we should be careful about is not undervaluing the music. Because there's so much need for it, making sure that, we're still negotiating fair contracts and making sure that we're maintaining the value of the songs. I'm excited about.
Are there and I know that I'm just asking questions. If you don't know, that's okay. Are there artists who are? I was just always under the impression that some of those places like Marmoset and Music Bed are mostly really talented instrumentalists who are crafting songs from the beginning that they know will work well with advertising or wedding videos. Are there, is it still possible for just an average tune to make it?
Definitely. Yeah. There are definitely artists that are getting really smart about figuring out what people are looking for and making really cool stuff that meets that need. But I think also there's, our catalog is probably 80% indie bands that have given us the records to work on, and an awesome collection of vintage music, actually, of a couple of labels with really incredible like classic soul and R&B stuff that does really well.
That's great.
So no, I don't think I think it's just a different need, right? Like some work doesn't want a song that has a really strong melody that's going to distract from what's going on. They really just want a jingle, like just leave it in the background, just a little and sometimes people want a really strong narrative statement, and those two things take a different approach. I'm learning a lot just in the last couple of weeks from watching our team who works on original music and how they approach those projects. So they'll get a need, and they'll look for stuff in the catalog and present a sort of slate of options, right? Yeah. So you have some original tracks and some original songs and some songs that we have in the licensing catalog to try to sort of dial in on what kind of sound the client's looking for.
Well, it's like you said, a few minutes ago, it's just you would never really predict what it is that someone's looking for. I had a buddy who used Marmoset for a TV show, and he only wanted indie rock. He wanted indie rock with vocal, which is kind of surprising, but it's great.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you're running Infinite. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think some of the best moments are when those kind of unexpected musical choices can really define a scene or define a project. I think our team here, both in the supervision and original music teams, do a really good job of looking for those opportunities. That's
awesome. Well, yeah, I've been aware of Marmoset for a long time, and they've always had a really cool aesthetic. And were they exclusively doing bands from the Pacific Northwest? Was that true? Like, I thought somebody told me that they were only artists from that region.
Oh.
Maybe that was
I took a sip of coffee there.
That's okay.
No, it was part of our tagline, if I'm honest, for a number of years.
Oh, okay.
It specifically said sounds from the Pacific Northwest.
Okay. Okay, maybe that's
that's probably where you got the idea.
Okay. Well,
but no, that's definitely not the case anymore, and so we're really excited to dispel that myth.
That's awesome.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay.
We love bands from all over the world.
That's great. So that's awesome. So you're running Party Damage still?
Yeah, we've definitely slowed down. But at the very most, I would say that we are hitting the space bar for a second.
Sure.
Definitely not holding up shop.
That's awesome. And has Infinite Companion launched officially, or you're building that right now?
No, I don't know when this is going to go out to the world, but I think the announcement of the project is going to be March 1st.
Oh, okay. Well, it won't be before then.
Yeah. So, well, I guess by the time this airs, it will exist.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled.
Excited about that. What excites you about the current music industry right now?
I think the thing that's most exciting to me is the degree to which barriers between genres are starting to dissolve. Like the idea of genre is starting to dissolve.
Totally.
I think there was a time in the late aughts and early teens when genre proliferated and, there were a million micro genres, and I think we're at sort of the fractal end of that process where they've gotten so small that they don't exist anymore. Right. To some extent.
Right.
You can use a set of adjectives to describe your music, but I more and more seeing shows that again present something unexpected. You can see two bands or artists playing together that you would never have seen playing together 5 years ago.
Yeah.
To me, that's really exciting. And I think people being more open to new music. I mean, even I'm not a big fan of aggressive EDM or dubstep, but the fact that kids, I want to say kids, but
sure.
people who are really passionate about that music. I mean, pop songs that you hear on the radio today are more interesting and more sort of avant, I think, than ever in history. There's such a wide variety of sounds being made and of techniques for creating sounds. It's a cool time, both to be an indie and to have, a community of collaborators and artists who are working together on incredible new sounds, and also just to, listen to top 40 radio is interesting.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but
that's
there's really cool stuff that has found mainstream success.
That's a really great answer. I hadn't really thought about, when I asked that, generally thinking about the somewhat depressing state of the industry and the potential future, but going back to the music, it's a really great point, and I think you're right. I think that is a really cool thing. I know even just on Fridays looking for new music, and I'm like, oh, what's alternative or what's electronic, and it's I would never have thought that band is, you click on an electronic record and it starts with an acoustic guitar. It's a cool time though. I think that's a really great point. That's exciting.
And I think you can look at Spotify in particular. I think they've done a lot, whether it's in reflection of that process or whether it's some one causal element. I'm not sure, but the way that you listen to music on that service is really, there. If you really look, you can find tabs for genres.
Right.
But most just
it's mood. Yeah, it's true. Or activities.
Yeah. And that's, one thing I want to be careful of is not reducing music to a merely utilitarian object. It is art and we need to treat it as art, but also if it is, maybe more like a craft where there are utilitarian uses for it. And if people need study music, and if we independent artists who are making incredible ambient music that's really great for studying, I think there's something to be said for having that utilitarian use support independent musicians.
Well, yeah, exactly, and I agree with you. But I think it's okay to use those terms because there are passive listeners through Spotify who just open it up and need to focus on studying, who can really fund the careers of people to make great art for their active listeners.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I think it's cool. That's a great point. Listen, thanks so much for doing this, Ben. It's been great to talk to you.
My pleasure.
I normally will kind of plan out a bunch of questions, but I just wrote down the CD Baby and Party Damage in Portland, because there was just so many questions I naturally had.
I'm sure I inherently derailed everything you wanted to talk about. Once I start talking.
It's great. Yeah. Thanks so much for this. Congratulations on an incredible career so far. I'm excited about
Likewise. Can I just say, I don't think I've expressed it yet, but I'm such a huge fan of your work, both as an artist and as a label. I have, tremendous respect, and I'm really excited for this project that you're undertaking here to highlight some of the work that labels do that people maybe don't know about. Because I think that's one of the most common questions we get, right? It's like, what does a record label do?
Yeah.
And so you're a fantastic example of
thanks, buddy.
The importance of labels as a curatorial force. So thank you.
Well, best of luck with everything, and it's going to be sad not to interact with you at CD Baby, but we'll stay in touch.
We'll figure out how to stay in touch.
Okay. Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye-bye. Bye. Oh my gosh. I love that guy. What a great guy. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and check out our previous episodes if you haven't been following along or if you're just joining us. Also, share the podcast wherever you can with some other folks in the industry. It's so great to see it growing, and I really, really do appreciate it. Thanks to Ben. Infinite Companion, check out their website, icrecords.com. They're just getting started, so make sure you follow them on Twitter. Their handle is kind of weird. I think they ran out of characters. It's Infinite Compani. Infinite is spelled the normal way. Companion is Compani. And then Marmoset Music, you really got to check them out. I'm sure they're very stingent with what they accept these days, but they... you can submit your music to them for licensing, and Marmoset Music is MARMOSET music.com. Thanks again for listening.